matter was sponsored by my colleague, City Councilor Frank Baker, and referred to the Committee on Planning and Development back on November the 29th, 2017. We are joined today by Natural Selections, the dispensary applicant who seeks to obtain a letter of non-opposition from the Boston City Council as required by Mass General Law. At this hearing, we will look to hold a discussion on the location, operation, security, community process, and the impacts to the surrounding community. At this time, we're also joined by my colleague, City Councilor Frank Baker, and also City Councilor Anissa Asabi George. So I know that my colleague is here, former City Councilor Michael Ross. Welcome, Michael. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
And you're joined by, if I have everyone in order of how I have it, J.D. Barry. Who's J.D.? J.D. Barry, Aidan O'Donovan, Eric Robinson, and our, obviously, old-time friend and former chief of the Boston Police Department, Dan Linsky. Welcome.
Good to see you, Mr. Chairman.
Who'll be heading up the security piece. So at this time, I'll defer to the lead sponsor and both of my colleagues who are from Dorchester, if they want to speak on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out today. This this proposal here was something that has been around for a while. Not just this one, but there were previous people that had interest in that space right there. And I consider myself probably on the front end of this industry here. I led the delegation to Denver. We did a lot of research on this. And one of the things that I came away from Denver with was it's a very aggressive business. And my thinking is that we should try and be on the front end of this business here. So one of the things that I'd like to see come out of this is a possible, see if there was a way that we could spread this industry throughout the city. I think it's an industry that's gonna need to maybe gain some foothold citywide for a couple of years, and then we could start to maybe roll out a little more. So maybe what I'm saying is, I'm okay with this petitioner here because I found you guys good to work with. It's always good to have Dan Linsky running your security, which I know is a big benefit. To look at, possible, have the progression of this be now that a couple are going to open in different districts, city council districts, maybe we should use this as a way to have one open in every council district, freeze it there, and then see how the business expands a couple years after that. So I know I rambled on a little bit there, but I'd like to turn it over to Councilor Anissa George.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilor Baker. As a resident of this neighborhood where this dispensary will be located, as well as the proximity to sort of the Mass and Cass intersection where we have a number of challenges in a population that's fighting addiction, I have some significant concerns about the location and the siting, but I'm also I'd say impressed with the quality and the presentation that your group has put forward, and also understand that maybe not all presenters or not all proponents that would be before the neighborhood and before the council would be of this high quality. So I look forward to being an active participant in today's hearing and understanding sort of the full scope and the full implications of the siting of this location on Clapp Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. So, Michael, I'll turn it over to you in terms of the order that you choose to present. So, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for holding this hearing, and Councilor Baker for your advice along the way, as well as you, Councilor Asabi George, both as Dorchester residents. We've valued the input that you've given to us, and the direct and frank conversations that we've had have only made us better, and we also appreciate the kind words that you've just given us as well. You've met the team, but just to put a little context to it, next to me is Aidan O'Donovan. He's really our principal. He is the Chief Operating Officer of NSAJO Holdings. He has substantial experience in this industry. Years ago, he went out to Colorado, and I can share that with you, but he's worked from the ground up and ultimately wound up owning two dispensaries in Colorado and really learning a lot about the industry. He's from here. He's returning home, and he's really excited to hopefully open in Dorchester. Also, next to, and you'll hear from Aiden in a minute, you heard about Dan Linsky was here. He's the, as the chair mentioned, he's the former superintendent-in-chief of the Boston Police Department, and he's running our entire security program. He's a real asset, having served many years on the narcotics undercover and for the Boston Police, and he can share that with you. He's been an amazing asset to our team. Eric Robinson is a Dorchester architect. He's with Rohde Architects, and so he brings a great kind of dimension to our team and really localizes what we're trying to do. And J.D. Barry, who is a Boston-based attorney who's been working on this project with us as well, has really added to our team. Just to give you the high, kind of broad brushstrokes, and then maybe turn it over to my colleagues for just a brief statement. We did prepare a presentation. We don't need to go through it page by page. I thought it was better to have a reference. I would say the high points of it would be some of the renderings and kind of the basic plan that we're proposing for 50 Clapp Street in the Polish Triangle section of Dorchester. Also in this packet that's relevant is kind of a commitment package that we've offered to the local community. We've had a number of direct meetings, mostly with the McCormick Civic Association. We're delighted to inform the council that the McCormick Civic Association actually voted in support, or it could have been characterized as non-opposition. I'm not entirely sure how they do that, but certainly in our favor at the hearing. It was a close vote, but nonetheless a vote in our favor, and we're really honored to receive that. They're a great group, and we've enjoyed working with them. We also met with the Newmarket Business Association. They've been kind of ground zero for working with some of the issues related to Massachusetts Avenue and some of the problems that we've seen on Massachusetts Avenue, and we want to help. Aiden wants to help. And Polish Triangle United, it's a newer group. They're just forming. We've already started to meet with them. And Billy Trabucco is I think, one of the principals of that organization, and we've been meeting with them as well. We've kind of laid out a package of support, but we also note that package is conditioned on policy coming out of City Hall, coming out of the mayor's office, coming out of the City Council. So, anything we do and commit to would obviously be at the blessing and direction of this council and this mayor's office. We also have in this packet, Mr. Chairman, of note, I think that you might want to just have me point out to you, there's a half-mile radius diagram. Some people in the neighborhood have wound up calling this the Flaherty Amendment. This is basically, this is on page 6, and what this actually does is once there's a dispensary, it draws a half-mile around that dispensary, and it protects the area of that dispensary so that there isn't a proliferation of additional dispensaries. Now, I suspect that once recreational regime is passed here in Boston and your zoning policy is enacted there, I would suspect that you would extrapolate that policy toward the recreational regime. I don't make those decisions anymore, but I would just suggest to you that this has been something that the community has responded to. And the interesting thing about this is that it allows, to Councilor Asabi George's point, it allows neighborhood residents to make a determination that says, if someone has to be here, then who might that someone be and where might they be? So it's not necessary. You might have people who might not be delighted about the fact that there's this new industry that's a brand new kind of industry that's got people saying, what is this? I'm not sure about it. But they can at least make the determination that if we are to be located at 50 Clapp Street, within a half-mile in every direction, another dispensary won't enter. And I think that gives people who might be on the fence, or even people who might be opposed to the industry, a reason to say, if I have to have an operator, I would want these folks. And I think the final thing I want to say, and then turn over to Aiden, is this one-pager really talks about what we're committing to. And I think this goes to the why would these people be the preferred operators as opposed to another group. I'd say first and foremost, we're all from we're all from here. We all have reputations in Boston that we cannot afford to damage, and none of us, we're all on the hook. You know, we're not from, even though Aiden's worked in Colorado, he is also from here. And so we want to, we have our names on the line. So we also made commitments. We don't want people walking in and just buying a joint or a small purchase of a marijuana for $5, just scrapping up some money, and like almost the equivalent of a nip you might have at a liquor store. And so one of the things that Aiden does, and no one had done this to my knowledge, is he made a minimum transaction price where no transaction can occur that's below $40. So now, if you're, you'd have to really pool together some resources to try to get that purchase. And I think that will deter bad behavior and deter someone who might be wanting to come in, and a certain element that might be wanting to come in terms of, just buying a very low price purchase. And there are other items on this that I don't need to go through at this moment, but the most significant one would be we will not operate as a recreational dispensary, even notwithstanding that regulations will likely come out next year in Boston. We will not, in 2019, we will not even seek application until at least 2020, and that's only if we've been operating for an entire year. If not,
So
we'll
come back to the community in 20 and figure it out from there.
Correct, Counselor. Yeah, we won't even make application. We won't be at your doorstep, Counselor, to ask for anything until we've been operating for a year and it's 2020, and or 2021 if we haven't been operating for a year. And I think that was another commitment that people in the community appreciate. So if I may, I'd love to have you hear from our principal, Aiden O'Donnell.
Is this Eric? Yeah. Thanks for having me today. Like Mike said, we're not going to go through our full presentation. Feel free to leaf through the PowerPoint, but presentation typically takes up to 45 minutes, so I'm just going to kind of give a high-level overview. Thanks for the introduction, Mike. The one thing that you did get wrong is you said I'm moving back to Boston, but I've actually been back now for almost 3 months after 12 years away. So I grew up in Massachusetts, moved to Colorado, and started working in the medical marijuana industry. Eventually, I became medical and recreational, and eventually I was able to own my own business out there, and have been owning and operating that for the last several years, while also pursuing licenses here in Massachusetts. For the longest time, the presentation was that I am moving back, but in September I actually did finally move back, so just wanted to correct the record on that. We're excited to be in Dorchester. We've been in this process since March. March is when we initially put this property under contract and began talking with people over at McCormick, began talking with everybody else. We feel that it is truly the best location in the Dorchester neighborhood for this type of use. We looked at a lot of different properties, some of them considered a little bit too high profile, some of them maybe had other issues, but ultimately we feel that strongly that this makes the most sense. We're very aware of how close it is to the methadone mile, and it is absolutely in our best interest to do everything in our power to mitigate that and to make that area better. We truly believe that we are going to be an asset in helping to fight what's happening up there, and certainly not extending it down towards the Polish Triangle. I think Dan could speak a little bit more to that in just a moment. But in the interest of time here, I think that I'd really just like to emphasize that compared to some of the other applicants in this city and across the state, we're proud of our experience and everything we've learned. There's been a lot of learning lessons in Colorado. There's been a lot of years of just learning this industry, and there's a lot of ins and outs, and the things that a lot of operators don't realize, and that comes with security, with compliance, with branding, with genetics. I mean, the works. I could go on forever, but I think it's really awesome what we've been able to achieve there and accomplish, and we're excited to bring that back to Boston. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Linsky to talk a little bit more about the security measures.
Thank you, Aiden. Mr. Chairman, Councilor George, Councilor Baker, thank you for having me. As you know, with the jobs you do and have done for a number of years, quality of life matters, neighborhood issues matter. There is no small neighborhood issue. About many years ago, in a former life, I stood on the State House with about 100 police chiefs. When this proposal was first thought to come to Massachusetts about considering recreational and medical marijuana, medical being the first, and I thought we shouldn't do it. I thought, based on my experience and my life information at the time, that we would see an increase in crime, we'd see an increase in youth utilization of marijuana, we would see increased problems and challenges, and the quality of life of any neighborhood where one of these locations was situated would suffer immensely. And I advocated for my fellow Massachusetts voters not to vote for it. About 78% disagreed with me, as they apparently disagree with me on several issues in my past voting record. I didn't support recreational when it came on the ballot. I don't know whether my children voted for or against it. They're both of legal voting age, and they won't reveal their votes to me. I can tell you, my wife says this is something that happens often. It's something that I think happens less often, but I was wrong. I have reached out to the police chiefs of facilities where medical marijuana has been in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and asked, what are your issues? How much is people hanging around? How many arrests? How many resources it taken? What are your calls for service? And I have been surprised. They are, in fact, seeing reductions in crimes around locations where medical marijuana has been situated. Because mostly these were areas where there weren't resources, where people weren't paying attention. Now you have dedicated security personnel, you get dedicated professional people. These are patients. These are people who are suffering from life-threatening illnesses, chronic illnesses, who are no different than somebody going in for an MRI, trying to get a shoulder fixed, no different from somebody going in for diabetic treatment with getting their metformin at their local personal care physician. These are patients. And they're working in a professional environment where we are highly regulated, thankfully so in Massachusetts, with regulations around security and compliance. I have with me the documents from Brookline, Newton, Quincy, and Salem, including the emails where they had at some points put police there for concerns and issues around the facilities in Newton, in Salem, and they have since removed them because the concerns they had did not present themselves. Like yourselves, I have a long dedication to the communities of this city. I have worked hand in hand with each neighborhood for over 28 years in my prior career to make sure that the quality of life was improved. I took quality of life concerns very seriously. Councilor Baker, Councilor Flaherty can, I'm sure, attest to calls at midnight for prostitution on Dorchester Avenue that we made sure our officers get out addressed, or youth acting up, causing disturbances, not allowing people to sleep late at night over in the M Street Beach area. Those aren't small problems, those are big problems. The same mentality I brought to this assignment. Michael Ross asked me to engage in this. We did background check on the client. My company, Kroll, is an international company that secures big pharma company. The ability of us to secure the site, cameras, access control, compliance programs, making sure that kids aren't there, no patient is using this in the neighborhood, surrounding neighborhood, no robberies or violence occurs, that's simple. We do that professionally for Fortune 500, 100 clients across the globe. The ability to take that to the next level is something that I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to do, and was talked about early on in our taking on this engagement. And the client and Michael both made a full investment that not only do we want to secure the facility, we want to make sure the area around it, the quality of life of that neighborhood is impacted positively, not negatively. And Aiden has allowed us to put a program together where we're going to be proactively working with the community, with Boston Police Department, to enhance security and the quality of life around the facility. That's with Boston police officers on paid detail patrols. I personally like foot and bicycle patrols. Maybe in February, cars are more likely. Hopefully, we go by whatever the district captain and BPD wants to do. Details is cheaper for the client, but it may be that we conduct a similar contract such as the South Bay Mall, where reimbursable overtime, which mandates that the assignment has to be filled so that there's always going to be an officer there. In addition to those officers, we will have personnel that work with our security team, that will work with public health officials, transportation officials, police, to make sure that traffic issues, other concerns around the facility are being addressed. I was pleasantly excited to see that the announcement came out today that Suffolk County District Attorney, the courts, and Boston Police are now going to have an alternative program that maybe can address some of the challenges that are going on in Methadone Mile, where people who are, having a hard time with their addiction issues, instead of being put into the court system, which can actually enhance problems, can maybe get a diversion program and get services that they need. And I believe this is a good opportunity for our security team to work with those agencies to try and address issues around that already exist that don't have enough resources.
Will you work with people on the street, you mean? Like
Oh, absolutely. That our security team would work with people on the street, with Boston Police, with, if it's a call to, we all know the quality of the program that they run in South Boston, the Gavin House, and what they do to change people's lives. So working with them, working with public health to identify not just a security issue, not just a, but issues that impact the quality of life around that
So you can help with
neighborhood.
people on the street that are walking around, that you'll make that commitment, I mean, through you, Aiden?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Beyond that, in the document that's in front of you, if I may, just direct your attention, I mean, we've committed at 0.5% to be directed by the kind of three main neighborhood associations with the oversight of Boston City Hall city officials. 0.5% in year one, we anticipate that to be
Mike,
$10,000 per.
I don't want to cut you off, but
Yeah.
can we get, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
apologize,
my only
but
point
I
is,
wanna-
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
Just real
Dan.
money is going to be put behind this.
Yeah, well, security's, thank you.
Yeah.
Dan, can we talk about cameras and the rest of your plan? And-
Absolutely.
And I'd like to hear a little more about because that's a good commitment out of you. If we can figure out a way that you guys are in the loop, because we can connect you on and help as much as we possibly can there. I think I could be helpful. That sounds like, whatever, we can go off record and talk about that. But can we get into cameras and
In addition to physical personnel for our staff, additional personnel from Boston Police staff doing assignments for us in and around that surrounding area, we're committing to putting additional cameras at the request and direction of the Boston Police Department.
Yeah.
Where are your challenging spots? Where are your locations? Where right now, the capital budget might not have the money for those cameras. We want to purchase those cameras, put them up, install them on our dime.
that will be connected back to the police system?
Mutual link, yeah.
Absolutely.
And connected into the South Bay system that they've agreed to?
Absolutely. MutualLink is the product that we utilized for numerous years. When I was with BPD, that's what I would love to go with. It's a proven quality, and the camera system that the Lantel Group has put up in the city of Boston has been
So
second to none.
you'll use Lantel's gonna do your camera system?
That would be my recommendation, absolutely.
Perfect, yeah, perfect.
And those cameras can be fed to Boston Police. It can be fed to, in fact, a supervisor in a Boston Police cruiser, if that's the case, to us. And when there's challenges and concerns, we want to work jointly in a quality of life task force with Boston Police, the residents groups, public health, transportation, to deal with all the issues in there and be an active participant and be additional eyes and ears on the street there.
Yeah.
So you're not just talking like cameras on Clapp Street, maybe like Everett Square or down near the South Bay Mall, you're talking about just
Yeah.
in that general area wherever cameras could be helpful and needed?
Absolutely.
We're working on a wide range of camera plan, and this will fit into that.
I want to talk with the captains from the two police districts and their community groups and say, where do you want cameras to best assist the problems? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a problem that's associated with this industry.
Yeah.
And
Where
who
can we
has
help
this?
you?
Is this C6 or is this 11 or 2?
We are on C6, but we're on the border of both. So I think some issues and concerns could, I think there's a joint conversation that should occur.
Okay. 6 and 2 or 6 and 11?
We're on actually, there's a little bit of 2. More 11 and 6, but 2 is definitely down towards the other side of Cass.
So you get 3 captains you'd be dealing with. Okay.
I've dealt with them before.
Very good. Any other questions?
Questions? No, I want to.
Keep on.
Yeah, okay. Aiden, what was your entry into the industry? You said you started here. Tell me how you entered into the industry. What was your background then? And
Sure. So I initially started very low level, started working for a handful of companies on the cultivation side back in 2009. So, 8 or 9 years ago now. That was really when things were just taking off in Colorado. Quite literally overnight, Colorado had on the books a medical marijuana law At that point, for about 8 years, I think it passed in 2000, went into effect in 2001, but it didn't explicitly allow for dispensaries. There was a memo from the Obama administration, the Cole memo, the first one, that essentially gave people in their minds a right to begin opening dispensaries in Colorado in 2009, and like wildfire overnight, there were dispensaries popping up 3 times a week in Denver, Boulder.
I believe they had like 1,400 licenses
It was unreal, and I was living there for that, kind of in ground zero, and that's really when it caught my eye, and I said, there's something to this, and there's a lot. There's I knew people that were in the industry, and I kind of noticed the lack of professionalism, and said this needs some cleaning up, and I think I want to be involved. Initially, it was mainly on the cultivation side. I've always had a kind of eye for botany and that type of thing. But as I kind of moved on up, I was working with 2 different companies. I kind of got more interested in the politics side of things, and that's when Colorado, the state, passed what was called House Bill 1284, which passed, I think, in 2010, went into effect in 2011, which established the Marijuana Enforcement Division, which would oversee and regulate and serve as a regulatory agency for all dispensaries, cultivations, infused product manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. And that pretty much put out of business over half the operators, because these are very fly-by-night kind of operations, kind of similar to, a very similar thing is occurring in California right now, believe it or not. But essentially they were playing catch-up. These licensees existed, and now it was time to regulate them.
Yeah.
No other state since then has done it that way, and I applaud Massachusetts for doing it the right way, despite the fact it's taken a long time, a lot of red tape.
Well, it's an aggressive industry, and that's the way it happened in Denver. It can't happen here.
It can't. It's not a sustainable way for anything to happen. So, despite the headaches in Massachusetts that have delayed things on a state level, it's for the best to take your time with it and to have a regulatory framework established and rules set in place before these businesses get going, rather than the other way around. So back to my story. Eventually, I was working with a company that I knew was eyeing spots in a.
What were you doing for the company?
Working in cultivation. So I was a director of a large portion of their cultivation warehouse facility.
Okay.
But you also have to have experience and
so what was your degree for?
So
does your degree match with going into?
No, actually, my degree is in educational psychology. Believe it or not, I was and right out of college, I was doing some work in that. And it's still something I find very, that I'm passionate about. I considered going back to school initially for kind of a neuroscience type path, but ultimately, got caught up in the medical marijuana industry. I've always had a knack for entrepreneurship and political science. So, which really is half of what the medical marijuana industry is. So essentially, in 2013, myself and a few other people put a property under contract to pursue a dispensary license at. It took a while, and that's in the city of North Glen, and that dispensary is still open and running today. And then we also, along the way, picked up cultivation licenses that were tied into that, facility. We also had another dispensary license at one point, but we were never actually running it. We just sold the license. And we we got open in the very beginning of 2015, so we've been open about 3 years. And started out for a few months as medical only, but Colorado had actually had recreational sales at that point for a year already.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Please.
Will you talk about, because one of the complaints that not complaints, but one of the issues that I heard time and time again were, the people that are on mass and CAS, that are whatever they're on, the people are concerned about that population making their way into your door, and can you speak on that? Is it the same person? Can you just tell me how you would deal with something like that?
Sure. So, and at the McCormick Civic and with the Newmarket Business Association, I tried to hammer this home time and again, that it's absolutely in our best interest, as a business, to prevent that from happening. It's not just for, it's not smoke and mirrors. It's not just for show. If we become known as the as the medical marijuana dispensary, where there are the crowd from the methadone mile lurking around, we're gonna go out of business. Nobody's gonna, come spend their money with us. So it's absolutely in our best interest to prevent that from happening, and we've
But is
implemented
that
it.
person gonna even wanna go in your door?
My thoughts are no, and that's kind of what we've been seeing in Colorado, and that they're typically people that are addicted to opiates are going to get their high from opiates, and if they are looking for marijuana, they have access to very cheap, kind of unregulated, gross kind of dirt weed, for lack of a better term, that they can buy for $5. They can buy for $5, and I'm sure there are, I've heard there are plenty of people that sell, that type of marijuana as well as other drugs on the methadone mile. It would be very out of character for that crowd to pool money together in order to come into our high-end medical marijuana dispensary in order to purchase something that is admittedly marked up due to the regulatory, the regulatory framework that we're dealing in, and the fact that we have to test everything. All of our products tested for microbiological contaminants, heavy metals, pesticides, et cetera, and it ends up causing the price to go up, and it financially wouldn't make sense for that crowd to be shopping with us. I think a parallel that I drew several times in McCormick was, is the NIPS parallel, essentially. And we're preventing that. If somebody wants, if somebody,
Can I ask you about the school now?
oh please, yeah.
Not to cut you off, but
No.
we have like 4
We have
hearings
limited
today,
time.
so
Yeah.
I love talking to you, but the school, how did your discussion go with the school over there? What was the feedback? Are we
Very
were those
well.
private discussions, or what happened there?
Yep. So we met with Shauna at.
And first of all, what is the distance that the school needs to be from the dispensary? And so what is the law, and then what is the school?
The law is 500 feet, and the school is over that. I don't know the exact distance, but
503 feet?
It's appropriately buffered. There's the Mike Ross and me.
So how did the discussions go
So
with the school?
the discussions went well. We met with Shauna, I don't remember, it was a few months ago, and we've been in touch with her since. And one thing that I actually brought to her attention that I volunteered to her was the fact that Natural Selections in Colorado is actually closer to a school, and a high school at that. North Glen High, the main school in North Glen, Colorado, where my dispensary is located, is adjacent to our dispensary. The law in North Glen was 500 feet as well, but it was actually measured by pedestrian access, not as the crow flies. So the way that it was measured by the city.
Yeah, the back door was on the other side.
Is that they had to go up the street, cross at the crosswalk legally, and come back down, at which point it was appropriately buffered. But in reality, we are really right across the street from North Glen High, and there have been absolutely no.
Did she connect on to the
I
high
believe
school?
I believe that she called the administrators there and was given a glowing recommendation from what I heard. I don't know. We don't have that in writing,
Okay.
but-
I have one more question for Dan. Dan, how did you vet Aiden?
We have a due diligence process when we have clients that we look at their background, their associates, we look at their finances we see where money came from, to see if they're working with people that are engaged in activity that we wouldn't want to be associated with.
Right.
We do this for clients in industries across the globe, and I think if you were to call the North Glen Police Department, they'll probably tell you that there was a reduction in crime and no issues or concerns relative to.
And you've been in touch, obviously,
We've been in touch. I was recently in Colorado with 400 police chiefs and 350 sheriffs and had discussions about all the issues and concerns around the industry. And like I said, I have been wrong on what I thought was going to happen and pleasantly surprised. And that's why we're at this table, because we feel confident in the client and the plan he's allowed us to put forward for the community.
I'm good.
Chair recognizes Anissa Asabi George.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all again for being here. I have a few questions that I'll try to get through pretty quickly. But first, Aiden.
Yes.
You just mentioned your sort of academic experience with adolescent or educational psychology.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, on our trip to Denver earlier this year, I met with the Denver Public School System, and they shared some concerns with me about how we're educating, or how they educated their youth prior to the rollout of both recreational and medical marijuana. And when I returned to Boston, I went and presented before the Boston School Committee, because I don't think, as a school district, we're prepared for both a wider use of medical marijuana and the eventual use of, or availability of recreational marijuana. Do you have some thoughts or advice on the local school district in responding to the more availability of marijuana going forward?
Absolutely, I do. First and foremost, I think that, the approach that's being taken, seeming to be a more widespread adopted recently with regards to treating substance abuse as a mental health issue, and as something that teens particularly are going to self-medicate when they have social anxiety, or if they're just trying to party or whatever it is, treating that as a mental health issue instead of a crime, and locking them up and potentially ruining their college applications is something that we're seeing more and more across the country, and I think is a great step in the right direction. I'll also say, and this is something that we talked about a lot in McCormick, that from our perspective, the concept of regulation is actually more effective in battling teen substance abuse than prohibition. I'll be the first to admit that as a teenager, when I was in high school, I did use marijuana, and I regret it. I think that marijuana is a good thing for an adult. I think it's better than alcohol as far as an adult that wants to relax at the end of the day. But when I was a teen, marijuana was everywhere. It was very easy to get because it was illegal and it was unregulated. Alcohol was very hard to get. You had to know somebody that had a fake ID, or somebody that had an older sibling and was willing to take that risk, and it was damn near impossible to come across a bottle of liquor or a keg. But cannabis was everywhere, and I think that was a product of the fact that it was unregulated. So I hope for a future where teens experience the same thing with cannabis, because there's not the black market has essentially been thwarted by industries like ours. So.
Thank you. And then within your product supply, what you'll have available for your customers, what's the percentage between smokable marijuana and then the edibles? So
our percentage in Colorado, it typically hovers around 60 to 65% flower, which is the smokable marijuana, and 30 to 35 to 40% of concentrates and edibles. So that encompasses absolutely everything, not just edibles. Edibles are actually a small, or usually closer to 5 to 10%, but also oils and rubs and CBD capsules and everything under the sun. So that's where we hover in Colorado. I don't think the market will be too different once it matures, but that's our best guess.
And then can you speak a little bit about fulfilling the potential customer demand? Because my understanding is the Brookline location, I forget their
New
name.
England Treatment Access.
Yes, that initially they had some challenges fulfilling their customer demand, and that created repeat visits throughout the week, which created some significant traffic implications. Can you talk a little bit about being prepared to fulfill the demand from day one?
Absolutely, and that's actually a conversation that we're having internally right now, because we have a 50,000 square foot facility approved in Fitchburg, Colorado, for Fitchburg, Massachusetts, for cultivation, and we're probably looking at building out. We're just pulling building permits right now, so we're going to begin the construction process in Q1 of 2018, and we are. What's that? No, 2018. Yeah. We would love to build the entire thing out at once, but we think that might be excessive. But we've determined a bare minimum to be about 40% of it, which will provide approximately 400 pounds of flour monthly between our 3 dispensaries. We also have a dispensary approved in Fitchburg and one in Watertown. We anticipate Dorchester being the most busy, but the breakdown of those numbers is in our materials, and we're very confident in meeting that demand. It's a poor business decision for us to go to market the way that New England Treatment Access did and to be running out of product. I mean, that's a bad look for any company. I mean, I don't know how they retain customers. I mean, customer retention must be down when people go in and they say, well, this is, they've ran out, or I have to come back. It's a hassle, and it's ultimately not a good business practice. So we are fully prepared to go to market with no less than 40% of that facility built out, which would make it one of the biggest in Massachusetts that I know of.
And I imagine, certainly not into agriculture, or even gardening for that matter.
Sure.
What's the potential for the loss of a crop due to infestation or some other problem that could impact your productivity?
So there always is the potential. I'm not going to say it's absolutely impossible, but we've learned our lesson in Colorado on what not to do through not just the past 3 years of me owning my own business, but also a handful of years before that working in other businesses where there's been loss. Usually it's not due to an infestation. Actually, it'll be due to not passing a test. So essentially you would say, you have a full harvest, everything gets ready to go to market, and then you send it to the testing lab, and then it comes back as too high in biocontaminants. I mean, like total yeast and mold count, for instance, would be why you would lose a crop, and then you would have to destroy that crop under the supervision of the state. I'm way less worried about losing due to an infestation, something like spider mites or powdery mildew, simply because the technology that we're going to be implementing, we're really building out our cultivation facility with all the bells and whistles. It's not cheap, but millions of dollars worth of manufacturing equipment, but making sure that we're preventing an environment in which those kinds of, in which the pests and the mildew and the molds can thrive, as well as standard operating procedures wherein employees have to, change their clothes before they come in and they leave. Pretty much not quite hazmat suits, but really kind of preventing any sort of cross-contamination even between rooms in the facility. We've tweaked and tailored those SOPs over the course of several years, and we're really comfortable with where we stand. It's also pretty fortunate that the Massachusetts testing requirements are very similar to those in Colorado, so we kind of know what we're up against, and have kind of created the procedures over the last several years in which to be successful in that environment.
Great. And then where will your offices be? Where will you physically be located the majority of the time?
So I'm hoping to physically be located in the Dorchester facility because it's actually 2 stories, and right now we have the first floor is 3,000 square feet, which will be a full sales floor, and upstairs is dedicated to corporate office. Out of anywhere that we have, it's closest to where I live. So that is the intention for that to be a corporate office. I think as we grow, hopefully as we do well, I think it might be in our best interest to have an office downtown. People, again, this is a very political and finance-based industry, and it might make sense for a company that's located in several places throughout the state to have a corporate headquarters downtown. But I think at the beginning it will be there in Dorchester, just simply because we have the office space.
Great. And then 2 more questions. In your presentation, you talk about market projections based on active card holders in the region. What's considered the region?
So the region, I think, for here is a 3-mile radius, essentially. I think it's, Dorchester, most of Dorchester, South Boston, a little bit of the South End, and it's a little bit of Roxbury and JP. But, essentially, we put together these projections for, again, our other locations are Watertown and Fitchburg, where we have dispensaries. In Watertown, we said it was going to be more of a 5-mile radius. It's a little bit more suburban. In Fitchburg, our active region was a 10-mile radius because things are way more rural out there. But as urban as Boston is, we felt that 3 miles was kind of an appropriate buffer.
And that's 3 miles from the facility?
3 miles from the facility. Again, I don't think that people are going to be traveling that much further than 3 miles, because 3 miles in Boston can take 20 minutes, if not more. Yeah, if not more. Whereas, 10 miles in Fitchburg, we're right on Route 2. We would easily pull business from Westminster and Leominster. But around here, that's the difference of going from, Braintree to Lynn, which nobody's going to do for medical marijuana. So, that was kind of our calculation there.
Great. And then my last question is, Dan, you were referencing working with people on the street. Can you just describe what that might look like?
So anyone who's utilizing drugs, alcohol, causing a concern for the quality of life of the neighborhood, we would be working with Boston Police to address those issues, identifying if Boston Police isn't there, that those issues are going on, working with, if police intervention is not the appropriate medicine for that situation, making a call or appropriate referral to the Shelter Commission or the Boston Police Street Outreach Team or Public Health Commission or, Gavin House or any other group that can kind of put all resources we can to dealing with these issues. So we used to have similar programs back when I was the chief. We worked with all the agencies in the city and the community groups and residents to try and, fix the problems. If it's lights are out and, it's a call to the mayor's office to let them know, and we can help, make that call and be eyes and ears. That's what we're hoping to be.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Chair.
Just Aidan, a quick question. So the business
Please.
model, it's 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., is that necessary? Is that the norm? Is that what your competitors are doing? Kind of just take me through that thought process. I'm thinking of Saturday, Sunday afternoon, in July and August, it's 100 degrees. People really going to go down to?
Yeah, yes, actually, believe it or not, we're open, those are pretty much exactly our hours in Colorado. Well, actually, up until very recently, the city of North Glen's extended hours till 10 o'clock. So after, in order to compete with some neighboring communities that are doing that. So we just extended our hours there till 10, but for the last 3 years, it's been 8 to 8. And it's pretty consistent across the board. Everybody, we don't want to pin ourselves in a hole of only serving the people that work 9 to 5s or the people that work in traditional industries. I mean, people use medical marijuana from all walks of life. Maybe they're a truck driver, maybe they're working a night shift at a hospital, maybe they're working at a restaurant and they and they have certain days off. Our intention is to be able to be open and available to serve them 7 days a week in the best way that we can without negatively impacting the neighborhood.
And then from a competitive standpoint, is that, there's a
In Massachusetts,
running right now
I can't speak to that entirely because the closest competitors, I think, Patriot is up in downtown. There's only one that's open in Boston right now, and I don't know the other. And I think they're open 7 days a week, but I don't know there's been 5 others approved, and I don't know what their proposed hours are because they're not open yet.
So Dan, is that the norm in the industry to be 7 days a week and that length of time, or?
Yeah, and just like CVS and Rite Aid, they're open on Saturdays and Sundays, and people, things come up, and, maybe you're a patient who uses intermittently because you have chronic pain, and when your pain flares up, you want to get the medicine, and if that's Monday through Friday, great, but sometimes it might be off hours and weekends.
And then from the community, you did through the community process, the various civic associations that you had to go and meet with and sit with, they're aware that it's 7 days a week.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that came up, and there was a little bit of pushback at one point on Sunday sales, but it wasn't harped on, from what I remember.
Council Baker?
Yeah, so would you be, if that comes back at us, would you be open to working with us for a Sunday?
Reduced hours on Sunday?
Possibly.
We could be open to that if absolutely necessary. It's not our preference, but.
Yeah, and my last question would be, how many jobs are in this is a couple questions. How many jobs in the dispensaries, and how do we get people that may live around, because that could be a ground floor job for somebody that in 7 or 8 years or 10 years could be looking at their own dispensary. How do you
Of
get-
course. We were looking at about 15 jobs or so for the Dorchester dispensary.
And that's not including Dan.
And that's not including security personnel. Possibly closer to 20 as we get busier. One thing as far as local hiring that we've talked about, and that is we've done in Colorado is we made that pledge to the city of North Glen. Back when I was going through hearings there in 2013, 2014, we said that we're gonna do everything in our power to hire residents of this community in order to give back. And if you go to our store today, there's at least, I think, I don't know exactly, but I think at least 3 or 4 that employees that are from North Glen whose resumes went to the top of the pile immediately because they were from that community. So everyone wants to work in the marijuana industry. We get a lot of applications every day, and it's tough to sift through. But one thing that bumps that application to the absolute top of the pile, that resume to the top of the pile, is their address. And if there is somebody that's from Dorchester,
So you're gonna need to hire and then send them for certification, because there'll be a certification for workers through
Yep.
the state.
Exactly. So
So you're going
that's
to hire and then pay to certify them?
That's the way it's working in Massachusetts right now, and that's the way it used to work in Colorado. I imagine as the industry matures, that it'll be more similar to other states where if somebody is interested in working in the industry, they go and get their badge, their certification essentially, and then they start making applications. Just because, again, it makes it easier for an employer. In Colorado, it only costs, I think, $40.
What's it gonna cost here?
I don't think they've determined that. The CCC is still working out those kinks as far as I know.
Thank you. I'm okay.
Very good. So that will conclude today's hearing with respect to docket 1488, a hearing regarding a medicinal marijuana dispensary at 50 Clapp Street in Dorchester. Work closely with the lead sponsor in producing a committee report with the anticipation of trying to have something at our next council meeting. So I appreciate you all taking the time to come in here to participate in the panel discussion, and we'll get something drafted and work with my colleagues and try to get a vote out as soon as possible.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Docket 1488 is, the committee is adjourned.